Pretty much everyone who has ever played a video game has heard of the video game company Nintendo. Odds are Nintendo has probably affected your life, whether it was playing the old school Mario on the NES or throwing Nintendo Wii remotes through the TV with your grandparents or just playing countless hours of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Nintendo Switch. And while most people know a lot of facts about Nintendo, like the fact that they are the greatest video game company on the planet, here are 5 facts you didn't know about Nintendo. The first fact on our list is revealing just how old Nintendo actually is. When most people think of a retro Nintendo, they think of going to the arcade with their friends in the 80s and playing Donkey Kong. But what if I told you that Nintendo date backs way before the 1980s? Like 100 years before the 1980s. We're talking 1889. In 1889, founder of Nintendo, Fushijiro Yamauchi, started small business Nintendo in Kyoto, Japan. Yamauchi was a woodblock printer and artist, and Nintendo began as a Hanafuda playing card company. Hanafuda is a Japanese way to say flower card. The cards were made from tree bark, and the ink was made from flower petals and berries. The cards were beautiful, and they represented the flower and foliage of different seasons in Japan. So while Nintendo sort of was into gaming in a very different approach, video games really didn't become a thing for them until around 1970-ish. And we all know that Nintendo's move to video games led to the introduction to none other than Mario, but not in the way that you would think. That's right, the second fact on our list is not only about how Mario got introduced, but also how Donkey Kong got introduced, and also about how the game really wasn't even supposed to be about them, but instead was supposed to be about Popeye. Yes, Popeye the Sailor Man. Before I go on, if you didn't know, back when arcades were huge, Nintendo created an arcade cabinet for the game Radar Scope. Unfortunately for Nintendo, this game was a huge flop. In order to save Nintendo and repurpose all of these unused cabinets, Nintendo called on the help of Shigeru Miyamoto. That's right, you probably know him. Some would call him the father of video games. Since he was more familiar with American culture, he knew how big Popeye was in America. This sparked an idea for him to make a video game based off of the cartoon. He was growing tired of the Pong games and shooting games that were so big in these arcades, and he wanted something that sort of told a story and one where a character could jump and a game that stood out. He wanted the love triangle between Popeye, Bluto, and Olive to be the theme in the game. However, getting the rights for Popeye didn't exactly work out for Nintendo. So this led Miyamoto to have to change some of the themes around a little bit. For Bluto, he would switch him out with a beast-like creature, Donkey Kong. For Popeye, he would make a mustache character in a red and blue jumpsuit that would be the controlled character that easily stood out on the screen. This character would eventually be named Jumpman, because he could jump. However, they decided to change the name of the character to Mario, which was named after the landlord of the Nintendo building in America, Mario Segale. All that was left was a character for Olive. They needed a lady in need of rescue for this story. This character would then be named, well, Lady, but they would later change it to Pauline. It's pretty weird to think about if you stop for a second. If someone had never made Popeye way back in 1929, odds are we wouldn't have Mario and Donkey Kong now. And if Nintendo had never started as a Hanafuda card company, we wouldn't have video games from them in general. Our next Nintendo fact is about a specific newer game, but it's also still kind of about the 1980s. If you've ever played Splatoon, you'll more than likely know that the N-Zap 85 is arguably one of the best weapons in the game. But the more that you've played Splatoon, you'll notice that the N-Zap 85 actually looks so much different than the other weapons in the game. Most weapons in Splatoon fit the graphics for the rest of the game. For example, a lot of them feature tanks that seem to hold ink for your weapon. And not only that, they're pretty colorful and fun weapons. However, the N-Zap 85 is gray, kind of bland compared to the other weapons, and it has no clear indicator as to where the heck the ink is stored. Well, it's because the N-Zap 85 was designed like this on purpose. The N-Zap 85 is modeled after this, the NES Zapper that released in 1985. Hence the name N-Zap 85. The Zapper was a form of a light gun that, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't a new thing for the world and really wasn't even a new thing for Nintendo. In fact, the first light guns were around in the 30s. Man, going back in time is so weird. Nintendo also even had light guns in the 1970s as well. Light guns are actually super simple concepts, basically using what the name suggests. light. Light guns have a sensor inside that detects light and reacts with whatever it is pointing at to cause a reaction. Specifically, Nintendo's Zapper was used to play games like Duck Hunt, Wild Gunman, and Hogan's Alley on the NES by pointing it at the TV screen to shoot the in-game targets. A lot of NES systems were bundled with the Zapper, and Duck Hunt was even featured on a lot of cartridges that also featured Super Mario Bros. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of games on the NES were compatible with the Zapper. Only around 17 total games on the NES were compatible with it. However, it is still a huge staple for Nintendo as well as the NES in the dawn of home console gaming. And if you show any older gamer a picture of one, it is sure to bring nostalgia. If you have ever held a controller in your hand, odds are you have used a directional pad, otherwise known as a D-pad. This is a staple in all of gaming. And while this is something that is on almost every modern controller known to man, be it on the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, PlayStation 5 controller, or Xbox Series X controller, you have seen a D-pad. For some reason, it is not on the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons. But what you probably don't know is Nintendo was actually the first company to invent it. In an era of rather large joysticks on arcade cabinets, the invention of the D-pad came from Gunpei Yokoi when putting the very successful Donkey Kong game on the Nintendo Game & Watch. He ran into a problem when deciding how to move Mario around because previous Game & Watch games only had the characters moving left and right. But Donkey Kong had Mario move left, right, up, and down. Originally, they tried a form of a smaller joystick comparable to the ones you would see on arcade cabinets, but this was very flimsy and unfortunately wouldn't work for the Game & Watch because it had to close. And he came up with the D-pad. The D-pad, or plus control pad, is a cross piece that allows players to click the button in 4 directions to move the character on screen. This interacts with the ball underneath the D-pad, and unlike other directional buttons, the D-pad allows players to be able to feel where they are on the controller by allowing the cross to act in a seesaw motion. So if you push down on the up button, sort of confusing I know, the bottom of the D-pad actually raises, allowing players to have full control. This D-pad has also been featured on every Nintendo console until the Joy-Cons for the Nintendo Switch. Who would have thought that a solution to a Game & Watch version of Donkey Kong would revolutionize gaming as we know it? Our 5th Nintendo fact that you probably didn't know comes from the game Animal Crossing New Horizons. Animal Crossing New Horizons is one of the biggest games on the Nintendo Switch. Thinking back to when this game first came out is insane. It was an insane time and you guys just know how it was, but the game really was so awesome, especially for the time that it released. But did you know that in this game, if you have a TV in your house, you can go in there specifically on a Saturday at 3:33 a.m., sit down, turn it on, and aliens invade. Well, sort of. Aliens do appear on the TV and kind of talk to you. Maybe they're planning a rebellion on Tom Nook. Who knows? He probably charged them a pretty penny to pay for that airtime on Saturday early morning TV. But I'll be honest, this is way less creepy than what I woke up to most nights at 3 a.m. on my TV. Lowrider as George Lopez jumps around. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, be sure to hit that like button and also subscribe for more videos like this. You guys have an amazing day and God bless.